Okay, so I believe we left off needing to answer question 8. So the Peace Corps was a program that sent college-age people to developing countries to teach, provide healthcare, build houses, build clinics, dig wells, do stuff like that. Besides being just a way to help these countries out, this program also helped encourage these countries to ally with the United States. It was the U.S. that was doing these good things for them. So they would ally with us and turn away from communism. So overall, the Peace Corps was an example of containment, trying to stop the spread of communism to these developing countries. Okay, number 9, President Johnson. So we learned about the Great Society programs under President Johnson. Overall, what were the goals of these programs? Fight poverty, fight racial discrimination, and create a more just and equal society. Number 10, Medicare and Medicaid were part of the Great Society. So Medicare is government-funded health care for the elderly. Medicaid is government-funded health care for the poor, people who can't afford health care on their own. And finally, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was also part of the Great Society. Under this act, federal funding was provided for education, and specifically this funding was aimed at helping low and income minority students in poor districts. Number 11, the Great Society is often seen as a second New Deal. Why? So both the Great Society and the New Deal were programs that used very, very high levels of federal spending to try to help people out and improve society. Number 12, how did the Vietnam conflict affect the success of the Great Society? So overall, Vietnam hurt Johnson's popularity. It made it harder for him to implement all these programs. Plus, fighting the Vietnam War was very, very expensive, and it took funding away from some of these programs as well. Okay, 13, talking about the Warren Court. Remember, the Warren Court refers to when Earl Warren was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in the United States. Some of the themes for number 13 of all the Warren Court cases that we studied: rights of the accused were protected. These cases protected the rights of racial minorities. And finally, these cases also protected students' rights in school. So 14, talking specifically about some of these cases. The Brown v. Board case, this was the case that declared racial segregation in schools to be unconstitutional. The Miranda v. Arizona case, this is where the Miranda rights come from. The result of the Miranda case was that police had to inform people when they're arrested that they have the right to remain silent and they have the right to a lawyer. Under Gideon v. Wainwright, if someone cannot afford a lawyer, one gets provided to them by the government through the Public Defender Program. In the Tinker v. Des Moines case, this declared that students have First Amendment rights in school, even though those First Amendment rights can be limited. And finally, in Engel v. Vitale, this case said that public schools cannot lead students in religious exercises like prayers. 15, Civil Rights Movement. What were the goals of this first half or the early part of the Civil Rights Movement in the 1950s and 1960s? So the goals of this early part of the movement were to change laws that were racially discriminatory regarding segregation, and also change some of the racially discriminatory voting laws. Number 16, what impact did the Brown v. Board case have on the Civil Rights Movement? So the successes that the movement found in this case basically showed that the movement was being successful and that change was possible with continued action. Number 17, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. pushed for the use of civil disobedience. What does this mean? So civil disobedience is deliberately but peacefully breaking an unjust law and possibly even getting arrested and sent to jail to show that the law is wrong. How does this relate to sit-ins? So basically, sit-ins are an example of civil disobedience. Again, the segregation rules were in place. The students who sat at those lunch counters deliberately broke the segregation rules to demonstrate to the public that these rules were wrong. 18, 3 years after the Brown v. Board decision, President Eisenhower to send troops to Little Rock, Arkansas. Why? So the governor of Arkansas, Orville Faubus, had basically refused to follow the Supreme Court's ruling, and he had refused to desegregate schools in Arkansas. So eventually, President Eisenhower had to send in the 101st Airborne Division to forcibly desegregate Little Rock High School and to escort several black students to class and make the state of Arkansas comply with that court ruling.